Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open the official Supreme Court records of a case that absolutely shook a nation. It's a story of power, of unthinkable brutality, and a plot so dark that a judge described it as being hatched in hell. Yeah, those were the exact words the trial judge used to describe the crimes at the heart of this case. I mean, this is a story where power corrupts in the most absolute way you can imagine. It involves horrific violence and a search for justice that lasted 16 months and had an entire country glued to the news.
All right, so let's get right into it. We're going straight to the official court records. We're going to look at what happened back in June of 1993, break down the two, completely different stories that were told in court, and figure out exactly how the justice system managed to untangle this whole awful mess.
Okay, so first up, let's look at the prosecution's side of the story. This is the version of events that the court, in the end, believed to be the truth. And it's a story that was built from the inside out, told by two guys who were actually there when it all went down.
Now, the state's whole case really hinged on these two star witnesses. And get this, they are part of the accused mayor's own security team. They basically admitted, yeah, we were part of the kidnapping, but they swore they had nothing to do with what happened after. And because of that, they gave this incredibly detailed step-by-step account of the entire night.
And when you look at the timeline, it's just chilling. You can see how fast everything happened. We're talking about just a few hours. In that short window of time, two young lives are just systematically torn apart in this wave of violence that just kept getting worse and worse.
So, according to the witnesses, this whole thing kicked off pretending to be some kind of police mission. But that didn't last long. The real reason they were there came out pretty quick. Armed with guns, the men trapped Eileen Sarmenta and Alan Gomez in their van near the university campus and just took them. They were taken to Mayor Antonio Sanchez's private farm. And there, Eileen was basically presented to him like some kind of prize. The court records actually say that one of the men announced, "Mayor, this is our gift to you, the girl you've been longing for." It's just unbelievable. And while this was happening, Alan was dragged aside and just horribly beaten.
And this is where things took an even darker turn. After the mayor took Eileen into his rest house, he came back out. And according to the testimony, he said these words right here, just callously handing her over to his men for what would become the final, deadly part of the night. So after that, the group just drove off. Alan Gomez was pulled out of the van and shot on the side of the road. Then they took Eileen to a secluded sugarcane field. And according to the witnesses, that's where she was gang raped by the men before she, too, was shot and killed. Okay, so that's the prosecution's story. Now let's switch gears and look at the defense, because they painted a completely different picture. I mean, faced with this incredibly damning account, the 7 accused guys basically built their entire case on 2 main ideas: alibis and trying to point the finger at someone else. Yeah, their strategy was pretty straightforward. First, everyone claimed they were somewhere else when all this was going down. And second, they tried to shift all the blame onto somebody else, specifically the son of a powerful general who they claimed had it in for Alan Gomez. And this is where the core conflict of the trial really lies. You have the state's witnesses putting Mayor Sanchez right there at his farm, calling the shots. But then you have the mayor who gave this really detailed alibi, saying, "No way, I was miles away with my family." And it wasn't just the mayor either. Every single one of the other 6 accused men had a similar story. They all claimed they were at home, far away from the kidnapping, the farm, and the places where the murders happened. So this really brings us to the heart of the trial, doesn't it? You've got 2 completely opposite stories. The whole thing really just boiled down to one single question. Who was the judge going to believe? And that was the massive question that the judge had to answer. It wasn't just about which story sounded better. It was about the credibility of the people up there on the stand telling their stories under oath. So many trials come down to this one idea: witness credibility. The judge has to look at everything: how someone acts on the stand, if their story stays consistent, how they hold up under intense questioning, all of it, just to figure out who's telling the truth. And in this case, the judge's decision was crystal clear. She pointed out that one of the state's witnesses, Aurelio Centenio, gave this incredible amount of detail and managed to withstand months of brutal cross-examination by 7 different lawyers without ever cracking. The other witness, Vicencio Malabanan, she described as just frank and direct. Bottom line, their testimony held up under pressure. But the alibis?
Well, the court saw them as weak, self-serving, and with no real proof to back them up. And this is where a really important legal principle comes into play. When you have a credible witness positively identifying someone at the scene of a crime, that almost always beats a simple alibi. But this case wasn't just about testimony. The prosecution's story was also backed up by some really crucial physical evidence. And it all started with something tiny, something found right there at the mayor's farm.
So what did they find? A single belt loop, just lying on the ground. A forensic chemist later confirmed it was a perfect match, color, size, fiber, for the white shorts Eileen Sarmento was wearing that night. This one tiny piece of fabric created a direct physical link between the victim and the mayor's property.
Okay, so then there's the second key piece of evidence. It was found on the roadside where Alan Gomez was killed, a spent shell casing from an M16 rifle. And this was going to be the final damning link in the chain, because ballistics tests proved that that shell was fired from an M16 that belonged to one of the accused, Louis Corcalone. This directly connected the murder weapon to a guy who swore up and down that he was at home, asleep the entire night. So now you have it all. You've got credible witness testimony backed up by solid physical evidence. The court had everything it needed to deliver its final judgment. 7, that's the number. 7 reclusion perpetua sentences, which is basically life in prison in the Philippines, handed down to each of the 7 men for what they did to Eileen Sarmento and Alan Gomez. Years later, when the Supreme Court upheld the conviction, they even commented on the overwhelming evidence using this incredibly powerful phrase. You know, this case is truly a landmark decision, and it leaves us with this one final haunting question. When you're faced with this kind of profound evil, how does a justice system make sure that the truth, no matter how horrible it is, actually wins out in the end?